Would you say there are identifiable stages of change? And if so, how would you describe them?
I think change certainly has to have some discipline and some logic to it. The entry point for change quite often is in the whole area of strategy. There has to be a strategic reason for change. In other words, why are we doing this and why is it such a great idea? Because maybe the organization is making money, maybe it is performing reasonably well. What a lot of people don't realize is that that performance is becoming squeezed, and with new entrants and probably different competitors, stronger competitors, new competitors, the sustainability of that performance is at risk. And therefore the board and chief executives are starting to look that we need to completely change this organisation in some way. So number one has got to be a strategic reason for change. Secondly, and this is the bit that I think, having worked in this for over 30 years, I think this is a bit that gets omitted, and it's a big, big issue, is if we stay as we are, organised the way we are, with the products that we have, with the processes that we have, we will probably get killed. So unless you can get your entire organisation saying, my God, we need to move from here, or we need to be doing things differently, etc., etc., you will not actually get people necessarily excited about the new idea, because they've been brought up in the past, they've been brought up in the present, and that's what they do. They come to work 9 to 5, and this is what they do, and you're now telling them that there's a completely new idea out here. You need to actually tell them what's wrong with the current one. There's two things that really, well, there's three things really that are absolutely at the top of change and change programs. Number one is clarity of direction. Clarity of direction. Not sort of woolly statements. Really, really clear. This is where we're going and this is why we're going there. Number two is urgency. And urgency means doing the things that matter extremely well and stopping doing the things that don't, so we can focus on the 6 or 8 things that fundamentally move the dial. They absolutely move the needle. You know, whether we have a year's supply of paper clips or 6 months supply of paper clips really doesn't matter in the bigger scheme of things. So it's the big things that move the dial, and that is in the area of urgency. What I call the change team is really the next big thing for me. Who are the change? Who actually owns this? Now for me, leadership is a massive thing around the whole business of change. And the number one leader has to be the chief executive. He or she have to lead that change team. And that change team has to be a leadership team. This is not hunkering down over a bunch of costs with a red pen and the accountant. This is actually about leading and inspiring the organisation to take up a completely new position. The next one, therefore, has to be the whole communication plan to everybody at every part of the organisation, and communication almost in different languages. You know, the communication that we give to city analysts, for example, surely we're not giving that presentation to the people who work maybe in the frontline stores, where to be a retail organisation or whatever, or bank tellers. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't understand it. It would bore them brainless. That you've actually got to put change and communication into their mindsets and the way they communicate and the things they care about, so that they can actually see this exactly happening. I can remember in my days in the pub industry, where we were talking about we actually needed to increase our revenue by 6.5%. Well, to go out and mention that to people in pubs, we have to increase our revenue by 6.5%, they sort of looked at me as if I got a bump on my head. Whereas if you said we need to sell 2 more pints of lager per session, per day, per pub, they got that. They really got that. So you have to translate it into that sort of language. So communication right across the piece actually has to be done by everybody, not just the CEO, but the CEO's got to lead it. He or she have to be able to demonstrate their passion, their commitment, They're caring for the change, as opposed to, oh, here's my deck of PowerPoint slides. How boring is that? You know, it's not about PowerPoint, it's about the heart and the head. The next thing I think you have to do is address what I call resistances to change, but maybe it's knocking down the walls of the past, some of the walls. Now here, this is where stuff gets really quite complicated, because some of the things we did in the past that got us to where we are, which actually got the organisation into the successful mode, could be the things that will stop it being successful in the future. That's quite tricky to confront, because a lot of people are wedded to those products, services, processes. Maybe they invented them, maybe they were well rewarded for them, and that's fine, but that's the past. You know, we have to be facing the future here, and therefore there's some very tough conversations that have to go on when we're knocking down some of the things of the past. Some of the things, not all of the things in the past, in the future will be bad, so we need to have some real thought around that. The whole business of measurement, if you get into measuring the things that matter, you can really get people to focus on the right things of the business. It's a journey that has to be tackled in stages. You know, wars are like a series of battles, and battles are a series of skirmishes. And I think change programs in any organisation is a bit like that. Let's be clear what winning the war means. Winning the war for the future. What does that mean? And how many battles, and where do we need to fight these battles in order to win the war? And that's where you start taking change right into the organisation. And quite frankly, most of these battles are not with the competitors. Most of these battles are internally. It'll be the internal battles that either win the thing or kill you. So resistance to change is quite often not overt at all. It's quite often covert, as we would understand if were we to read some of Kellerman's stuff, Barbara Kellerman's stuff about followership in the whole baggage around leadership. Not all followers are entirely supportive of what you're trying to do. So not everything will therefore be a success, and you have to be open and you have to be honest about the failures and what you learned as a result. So we failed on this, we tried to do this, this is what we learned, and this is what we're now going to do. Be open, be honest about that sort of stuff. That gives you integrity and it gives you authenticity, which is required in any change program. The final thing really is this thing about culture and mindset. It's a huge issue. Trying to change an organisation into a new model, you've actually got to go through this whole cultural blancmange baggage that you have to get through. So once you've done the strategy stuff, which is the what are we going to do and why we're going to do it, and that's nice and clinical and people can understand that. How we're going to do this is all about the culture and getting people into a new way of thinking. You know, there's this great comment that comes from Richard Pascal at Stanford University, which is around act your way into a new way of thinking, don't think your way into a new way of acting. And that's a powerful thing. Change is about doing. It's about doing, measuring, changing, doing again. It's a constant circle. So the culture is really important. But once you start seeing and feeling and measuring success, you need to communicate that. Small wins matter. If you say nothing, then people will start thinking, well, it's clearly not working. We're not seeing any benefits. Now, once you get hold of these benefits, once you understand that there is success, the new shoots of growth of the new organisation are starting to emerge. You need to take photographs of them, you need to herald them, you need to reward them, you need to recognise them, you need to communicate them, because that will get past the it will get past the cynics in the organisation, and the cynics will kill you. And really, the final point really after the culture thing, but it actually goes together, is recognition and reward. You will never get there if you don't address how people are recognised, how people are rewarded. It just won't happen. So you need to be as imaginative about your remuneration, because the prize of getting onto this new model ought to be amazing, ought to be terrific. It's worth doing, both financially and every other way. We're creating an organisation more fit for the future than the one we have at the moment. So therefore it's a big prize, and people want to be rewarded for achieving that prize. And it seems rather obvious, but quite often most organisations don't do the obvious. This is obvious, but if you don't do it, you will have a huge risk around getting that change into the success box.